Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going beyond the 4% rule and diving into modern strategies for early retirement. We are literally taking a magnifying glass to the absolute holy grail of retirement planning. We're going to deconstruct the most famous financial rule in existence, figure out exactly where it came from, and see how well it actually holds up in the modern world. 4%. For over 30 years now, this single, clean digit has been the undisputed answer to the ultimate question, right? How much can I safely spend in retirement without running out of money? The traditional math says, take 4% of your portfolio the very first year, adjust it for inflation after that, and boom, you won't run out of money for at least 30 years. It sounds absolutely perfect. I mean, it's simple, it's actionable, and it's comforting. But here's the secret. This single number should actually bother you a lot more than it does. Because the truth is, the rule isn't exactly dead. It's worse than dead. Over the years, that single clean 4% quietly fractured into three completely different numbers, all while everyone just kept blindly quoting the original. And if your goal is to stop working and retire early, say, before the age of 60, well, this rule has actually been answering the completely wrong question the entire time.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how this supposedly fixed, totally safe number actually breathes and shifts. It depends entirely on who's doing the counting and what year it happens to be. Back in 1994, it was calculated at exactly 4.15%. Then Morningstar ran the numbers and declared, nope, it's 3.8% in 2022 and slightly higher at 3.9% for 2026. Meanwhile, the original creator of the rule recently revised his own number all the way up to 4.7%. Crazy, right?
So to understand why this happens, we really have to look back at where the rule came from in the first place. Back in 1994, financial planner William Bengen studied every single 30-year retirement window in modern U.S. history. But here's the catch. He wasn't looking for the average outcome. No, he was searching for the absolute worst-case scenario. Think of it like structural load ratings for a bridge. You don't build a bridge just to hold the average truck, right? You design it to survive the absolute heaviest truck that will ever cross it on the worst possible day. That original 4%, that was the heaviest truck number. The reason the safe withdrawal rate keeps drifting over time is pretty simple. The rule kind of pretends the world stands still. It assumes bond yields, market valuations, and inflation expectations just remain perfectly fixed. But we all know they don't. And actually, there's a fascinating, almost counterintuitive detail hiding in the data here about your asset mix. Remember that 3.9% safe rate from Morningstar? That's actually for a portfolio holding only 30 to 50% stocks. You might assume an all-stock portfolio would give you a higher safe rate because, hey, higher growth over time. But it actually gives you a lower one. Why? Because volatility feeds the one thing that truly wrecks retirements. And that brings us to the real retirement killer, sequence of returns risk. This single concept matters so much more than the actual withdrawal number itself. Basically, it means two different retirees can earn the exact same average return over a 30-year retirement, yet end up in completely different places. One is comfortably wealthy, and the other is completely broke, and it is based purely on the order that those returns arrived. Let's jump back to our engineering metaphor for a second. Imagine two structures under the exact same total load. One takes its heaviest stress in year one, right out of the gate, before the foundation is even settled. The other takes that exact same heavy stress, but not until year 25. They experience the identical total load, but they're going to have wildly different failure rates. Well, a portfolio you're actively drawing down works the exact same way. So here is the absolutely crucial point. The first 5 years are the literal load-bearing wall of your entire retirement. If you lose 30% in your first 2 years while you're also pulling money out to live, you're essentially forced to sell shares at the absolute bottom just to fund your groceries. You've locked in the loss, and there are fundamentally fewer shares left to multiply when the market finally recovers. Morningstar's research is incredibly blunt about this. If you hit bad returns in the first 5 years and you don't cut your spending, you're far more likely to run dry. A fixed 4% rule completely ignores this load-bearing wall. Okay, so how do we fix this? Well, we stop treating the withdrawal as a fixed, unchangeable number and start treating it like a dynamic system. Enter the Guyton-Klinger approach, which is commonly known in the financial world as guardrails. And this brilliantly illustrates the difference between a stuck dial and a smart thermostat. A fixed rule basically sets the temperature once in 1994 and simply walks away. Guardrails, however, act like a smart thermostat that intelligently responds to the changing conditions in the room. Mechanically, these guardrails are actually quite simple. You set an upper bound, let's say 6%, and a lower bound, say 4%. If the market tanks and your withdrawal rate drifts up past that high guardrail, you trim your spending just a little bit. On the flip side, if the market booms and your rate drops past the low guardrail, you give yourself a raise. This system automatically pulls back exactly when sequence risk bites. And because you have that embedded safety net, it actually allows you to start your retirement with a higher initial withdrawal rate, around 5%, with comparable safety to the old rules. Pretty smart, right? Now, if you're planning to retire early, like well before traditional retirement age, even dynamic guardrails aren't the whole picture. Why? Because not all of your money is available to you all at once without triggering some pretty severe account penalties. When you uncover this, it really changes everything. Early retirement isn't just one long, continuous 30-year draw. It's actually a bridge, and it has to be crossed in 3 distinct phases. Picture this as a 3-part journey. Phase 1 starts the very day you stop working. Your tax-advantaged accounts are locked up tight, meaning only your regular brokerage money is spendable. This is your highest sequence risk window because it's simply the smallest usable pool of money. Then, Phase 2 kicks in when you hit 59 and a half. Your retirement accounts unlock, they join the spendable pile, and suddenly your required withdrawal rate smoothly drops. Finally, Phase 3 begins when Social Security or pensions kick in, covering a solid base layer of your spending. This means your portfolio only has to fund the gap on top. Averaging these 3 completely different financial regimes into one flat withdrawal rate, it just doesn't make any sense. But, let's look impartially at the other side for a minute, because there is a very fair case for keeping things simple. The 4% rule was never supposed to be perfectly precise. It was just designed to survive. And historical data shows that most of the time, it didn't just survive. In the vast majority of historical windows, the retiree actually ended up dying with far more money than they started with. Plus, even William Bengen's revised worst-case number is sitting all the way up at 4.7% today. And that brings us to a really crucial behavioral psychology argument. There's a saying in the industry that the best withdrawal strategy is the one you'll still be running at 85 without needing a spreadsheet. A beautifully complex guardrail system that you immediately abandon the very first time it tells you to cut your spending, that is strictly worse than a slightly rigid, simple rule that you'll actually faithfully follow. For those who value peace of mind and ease over total mathematical optimization, well, simplicity is a feature, not a bug. So, what does this all mean for us? What's the ultimate takeaway from this explainer? Well, first off, stop searching for a single magic number. That question simply has no fixed answer. It might be 3.9 today, it might be 4.7 tomorrow, depending entirely on the year. Instead, ask yourself this: what is your rule for adjusting when you're wrong? Pick a conservative starting rate, absolutely protect those first 5 years like the structural load-bearing wall they are, build in guardrails you will realistically honor, and plan your life in phases. Your retirement shouldn't rely on a rigid digit from 30 years ago. It should rely on an adaptable plan. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.